It's a great honor and pleasure to welcome Professor George Akerlof, Nobel Prize winner and professor at the University of California, Berkeley, who came here at World Economic Summit 2012 to share his inspiring ideas in economics. So, Professor Akerlof,
yes.
Could you share your ideas and impressions about the Economic Summit? I hope you've enjoyed so far.
Yeah, this is really fabulous. This is really wonderful. And you know, the wonderful thing is that you've all organized it yourselves. I mean, I feel that actually makes it organic, that somehow it really is yours. And so it's really much better than the type of thing that somebody organizes for you and then you just go.
Thank you very much, and I would also like to let our viewers know that you attended dinner and dance. I hope you liked that as well.
I did indeed, yes, that was a great deal of fun.
Okay, great. So now we will shift to a bit more about economics, as we are talking about economics here for more than 3 days. So psychological effects on economics decisions have been mentioned in works of Keynes more than 17 years now. And why they become increasingly important along with sociological incentives?
Well, I think actually just now, with this new recession that we're beginning to understand Keynes. I think we didn't really understand Keynes before now. That if we look at what Keynes was talking about, like the excesses in the stock market which occur, that's largely due to psychological forces. And it's that type of excess that we had in the last 10 years, which is actually leading to the problems which have happened in the current Great Recession. And if people had read Keynes carefully and had thought about what Keynes said, as Keynes did himself, then in fact I think we would have seen what was going to happen. Actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about this afternoon.
That's great. And now, referring to your book, Animal Spirits, could you let us know a bit more about spirits such as corruption, bad faith, confidence, and how they are related to economic crisis nowadays?
Yeah. So, okay, I'm not sure I've 100% thought, so I'm just going to say what I'm going to say and see what it said. I think that when you go into the boom times, that people are not sufficiently suspicious. They don't think about what they're doing. That's, I think, what this overconfidence is all about. That somehow, whenever you make an investment, you should be a little bit careful about it. But that's what happened, I feel, between 2000 and 2007. That people were just making very bad investments, and they had confidence that those investments were going to pay off. And in fact, they were very bad. And so I think part of what Keynes was talking about was that you have these animal spirits. There are these times when people are not sufficiently careful. And then, of course, you get into the next times, once it's discovered that people have been so uncautious. You get into the bad times, and people are too suspicious. So you have these swings. And I think people took one message from the general theory, which was when you get into a bad time, how you get out of it. But they failed to see that his book was actually much deeper, which tells you why you have the boom times, and then why you get the bad times. And so anyway, I'm going to talk about that some this afternoon, too.
Great. And could you, just for our viewers who were not able to read your book, at least not yet, explain a bit more about those 5 animal spirits, what they are, and what do they represent?
Okay, so what are the 5 animal spirits? So the first one is confidence, and that is that people are confident, that sometimes people are much more confident than others. That's something that we've been talking about. A second is about looting, that sometimes that we look at accounting measures which can actually be polluted, and people take advantage of other people. A third thing is stories. One of the things that motivates us in our lives are stories. So, each one of us here, like you and me, we have stories. We have a story about what we're doing here. And that is what motivates us. A lot of time we put ourselves so you tell yourself a story, for example, as a student at Warwick. And that is that's what motivates you during the day. Another factor that people don't take into account is money illusion. That most economics is written with the idea that people are very good at not having money illusion. That somehow we don't look at nominal wages and nominal prices. But in fact, when you look at what people do, in fact, people do take into account money illusion. Okay, now the fifth one, do you have it? You don't have it down there.
No, but can you tell us, you mentioned, what do you think, which one is maybe most related to the economic crisis? Which has the largest...
a lot of these, I think actually the three that I mentioned has a lot to do with the economics crisis. So the confidence, we had this period of super overconfidence. We had this period when people were looting, in which people were making very bad investments, partly because the accounting and partly because the ratings agency did so badly. And then the third thing is there was a story, and so things were covered by the stories that people were telling about this. And people were telling a story which said, oh yeah, these terrible things, stupid things can be taking place, but it's really okay. And so I think that's partly how we got into this, because there was a story. And you could read this story in the FT every day. People should have been more careful.
In your previous interviews, you pointed out the importance of firm goals set up by governments and as the only way to exit the crisis or to overcome any major obstacles. So, from your perspective, our governments, do they have clear strategies of what they want to achieve, or they are just buying time in the meantime?
I think that a more careful thinking out, especially on the international level, of what the monetary and fiscal policy, especially the fiscal policy, should be, could be very useful. That there is a problem which is not widely understood by the public and by the press, but is actually quite well understood by economists. And that is, if you decrease government spending and you decrease taxes by the same amount in a closed economy, which is approximately, the EU would be close to a closed economy, and the United States economy sufficiently big, it's closed. Then in fact, what will happen is you'll get a reduction by that same amount in government spending and taxes. It's known as the balanced budget multiplier. On the contrary, if you increase government expenditures and you increase taxes by the same amount, then in fact you get an increase in the level of GDP. And very recent work has shown that in fact, if you take the major macro models, you get exactly that effect. It's uncanny that economic theory, which usually is a good approximation, but doesn't tell you everything, here actually comes close to telling you everything. You get these multipliers, which are almost exactly one.
And actually everyone agrees it's quite a deciding moment for Eurozone in terms of that there have to be brought up some sharp cuts. However, what's the toughest decisions that have to be taken? What's optimal to be done at this situation?
Okay, so I think that what we need is the spirit of Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
So The G20 meeting in Pittsburgh, everybody got together and said what needed to be done, and we had international cooperation. It was not just international cooperation within Europe, it was also international cooperation across the Atlantic. I think that it was, in fact, that meeting and that spirit of Pittsburgh where everybody agreed that this was a crisis and something needed to be done, which very shortly after Pittsburgh, the economy began to turn up, both here in the UK and across the Channel, and also in the United States. And it's really quite dramatic, that turnaround. Well, you know, people say, gee, we're still in the recession, but people have forgotten what was happening in the fall of 2008. In the fall of 2008, the whole of the Western European economy and the US economy were just simply dropping like a rock. And then, you know, a near miracle occurred. That drop stopped. And since that time, we've had a little bit of a recovery, which is a good thing. And the reason we got that was because we did have this international cooperation, and the governments really did have, in essence, they did have a plan, and it worked.
And even though there are some positive signals of recovery of global economy, some economists have already forecasted a new crisis in a couple of years' time. So what's your opinion on that? Shall we be optimistic, pessimistic, or just realistic?
Okay, I think that we should be, we got to wait and see, but I think we got to be cautious. We got to be cautious in the sense that we have to be aware that there is considerable fragility to the financial system, and we have to still maintain that same spirit that people had in Pittsburgh. And in Pittsburgh, what people were saying was, we're all in this together, and we always have to act in this together. And I think if we can do that internationally, then in fact we can get through this pretty well.
As we've already started with some projections about the future, I think it will be quite interesting to involve your recent work on identity economics with Professor Crenton. And you've listed in the final chapter of your book 5 identities which might influence the economy, and those are individual actions, externalities, creating norms, identity and regret, and finally choice of identity. So which of these 5 you would say will have the largest impact on an economy in coming years?
Okay, well, I feel that identity is always with us. And what I think the difference between a good economy and a bad economy is actually, I feel the most important thing is identity. I think this maybe goes back to the spirit of Pittsburgh. And when people are cooperative and believe in being cooperative, then in fact, economies tend to work. And I feel when you have economies where people are not cooperative, and basically they see things as it's me against you, then things tend not to work. So I feel that identity, I feel identity is central to almost, you scratch any economics problem. And I feel that identity shows up usually as something interesting and important. So remember we mentioned the stories. And so you're probably thinking now, just maybe in the subconscious, about what you're doing sitting here. You know, you have a story as to what you're doing. I guess I must have a story too. And probably everybody who's listening to this or seeing this has a story. So you have a story. And that is what's motivating you, is that you're sort of living through this story. What is the story? The story that you have, that's really your identity, who you are within that story. That's how we live our lives. And that determines whether you're going to do well at your job, whether you're going to do well in your classes. It determines whether you're going to have a happy day or a sad day. So I think identity is really important.
Economists have faced a lot of criticism recently as they didn't manage to predict some events. So do you think that identity economics might help them in future to avoid mistakes and to be better at predictions?
Okay, I feel that there's actually I feel there's a concept from identity economics that is useful, and that is, economists tend not to make the distinction between decisions we consciously make and decisions we unconsciously make. But that's really central to a great deal of psychology. Maybe it's actually central to almost all of psychology. I believe that if economists had been thinking more about the decisions that we make unconsciously, then we would see that in fact that we're much more manipulable than economists typically think we are. You know, a lot of economics is about this, about manipulability. But the key to whether we are manipulable or not is the manipulable part is the subconscious. So I think if we'd seen that, we would have actually, if we'd seen that people are quite manipulable, then in fact we would have been suspicious in precisely the right way. And then if we're suspicious in precisely the right way, I think we would have foreseen the crisis and why it occurred. So I think there's actually a lot of strands in what we could do with economics and what is standard economics, which would have led us to have foreseen the crisis much better. We should have all been in there pitching and saying, look, these financial arrangements that people are making are just outrageous. And we should have then said, stop it.
And considering the recent trends in capturing a wider variety of variables in economic analysis, do you think that those unconventional, let's say, variables present an extension of conventional methodology, or rather a challenge for them to change completely?
No, I feel that sort of the standard framework of economics, you can just use this, and you just put it in, and partly the book that I wrote with Rachel Cranton on identity is how you can incorporate this just using standard utility theory, and you just do it. And I think one of the good things is it means that these parts of our lives, which are really important to all of us, then don't get omitted, and it can be really key for economics.
Thank you very much for a very pleasant interview.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you once again for coming at Warwick Economics Summit.
Well, thank you for arranging this and for being here. It's my great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.